Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios on Campus Quarter. Josh McCuistion in Houston HQ. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. A big recruiting weekend has come and passed. George and I hit up on Sunday here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, talking all the Jim Knowles fallout. He's headed to Penn State from Ohio State. Just real quick, Josh, did you have any thoughts, concerns, criticisms, announcements, anything to come with the Jim Knowles news that came on Sunday?
It's so cruel for Oklahoma fans, guys. Like, I feel bad because it's one of those things. Like a month ago, if you'd have said Jim Knowles isn't going to be Oklahoma's defensive coordinator, yeah, obviously, like
right.
We all know it. But the way it's played out, you're like, God, they were so close to like having that big win that it feels like they've been waiting for something to go their way all off season. And again, you get John Mateer, you get Ben Arbuckle. I'm not saying there haven't been wins. There absolutely have. It's just, it feels like if it can go wrong for Oklahoma at this point, like something finds a way to just hurt them unnecessarily, and it's brutal. Like I get it, but I mean, again, do I think that Jim Knowles was necessary for this defense to be really good? No, I don't. I liked it from the perspective of it being a guy that Brent could trust to run that defense and knew we would run it at a high level, and Brent could just be the head coach, like and focus on being the best guy he could in that role. Now, I think we know what we're going to get. I think we all kind of expect some version of kind of what OU did last year, where Brent's, kind of got one foot in one job and one foot in the other.
Exactly what I think that we said probably doesn't need to happen, but certainly will be interesting as, the defense coordinator search continues to unfold here over the next couple of days, possibly as soon as Monday evening or Tuesday or Wednesday. You would expect something to happen here in the early portion of the week in terms of movement for that position. We talked about a couple of names on Sunday's show if you would have watched that here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. But Sunday was the end of a junior weekend in Norman, and I think first off, I know that Steve Wiltfong's done some reporting on it. Chad Simmons has done some reporting on it. It was a very talented list of guys that were in town over the course of the weekend. Just big picture-wise, anything stick out to you, Josh?
I would say, the vibes, like where we're talking about, like Oklahoma fans taking some hits, and it's been kind of tough and that sort of thing. When you talk to these recruits who are around, they mentioned a lot the freshman class, the incoming guys. So they've just been there for a few weeks. The Ryan Fojays and the Michael Fasusis and that whole crew, they were like, man, it was awesome. And they're talking about how much they love it there. And the coaches were very upbeat. Like there was no well, we're going to try to figure this out in 2025. Like, I mean, and again, you got to expect that these guys got a job to do. They all know it. But I will say, like, there's nobody hanging their head around the Switzer Center or any of those vibes. So when you talk to these guys, they came away glowing. Like, I mean, I've heard, and I kind of mentioned in one of the first stories we put up was, there's an A&M commitment that was there this weekend. There were two, but there's one in particular that, I know some people around think Oklahoma's got a chance to flip, and so they're doing some things well. Like it's not all is lost, and I don't want anybody to have that perception because that's not what I got from talking to any of these guys. And again, several of these guys had never been to Norman before and are already, the highest rated guy. Jaden Hall is, Kaden Hall. Kaden is already talking about a return trip for the spring game.
Number 2 safety in the country out of Milton, Florida. The A&M commits, Marquel Ford, Ryan Gilbert, both in town. We get to those guys here on the back end of the program because I think that to really kind of get a good idea of what this weekend was, almost kind of got to jump back to Friday and the news that came out that Oklahoma had made a 2026 quarterback offer. Obviously, you have Jaden ONeal in tow out of Narbonne in Los Angeles or Long Beach, but Bo Bentley earns an offer going into the weekend, a Salina quarterback out of Salina, Texas, led him to a state championship this past season. Just in terms of kind of the big picture overall for this 2026 class, we always talk about the quarterback position, Josh. How surprising was it that Ben Arbuckle offered Bo Bentley? And we talked about it going back into last week. Bo Bentley had talked to Steve Wiltfong, called it a dream school offer. Where is everything with the quarterback situation for Oklahoma in 2026 with Ben Arbuckle coming in here at the beginning of January?
Yeah, as you cover this longer, I mean, you get used to, okay, this guy, he likes to make offers at this point in the year, and this guy, he's kind of set on this type of player. You kind of develop patterns. You kind of know what you're looking for. Ben Arbuckle, obviously, we have no track record. We're just watching this and learning. And I think the assumption had been, well, Jaden ONeal's super talented. He would have loved to have a guy like that at Washington State. He's just going to keep Jaden ONeal, and that's all there is to that story. That had been my assumption for a long time. Even when this offer went down, I kind of felt like, yeah, that like, okay, this is a backup situation, or maybe they want to take two quarterbacks. But the more you looked into it, you kind of knew that Jaden ONeal had planned to be the only quarterback in this class. So this is an interesting development. And my initial reaction was probably wrong. Like that's probably the best way I can say that. And just talking to some people over the weekend, spoke very briefly with Jaden, and spoke and have yet to connect with Bo Bentley. I'm still working on that. But I think this is more interesting than maybe I thought at first. I think maybe there are some decisions to be made, from several people. But I definitely, I mean, this is not a token offer. This is a guy that Oklahoma really likes, and I've talked to some people around Salina over the last 24 hours, and this is a kid that his coaches rave about in Bo Bentley. I mean, they like this guy a lot. Think he is a I had one coach describe him as a program changer. And, obviously guys love their players. We get all that. But I talked to a lot of coaches through the years, and you don't always hear guys that stand on a table for somebody the way I kind of heard from Bo Bentley, or for Bo Bentley.
Josh, have you seen Bo Bentley play? Like, what do you like about his game? I know I've seen some of the stats floating out there, and I know he comes from a really good program.
Threw for 3,330 yards, 47 touchdowns, ran for 16 while also running for 933.
I mean, that'll do.
Had MVP of the state title game at a win over Kilgore at a traditionally powerhouse program in Salina. Yeah. Sorry, just
no. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the kid
5 touchdowns in the state championship game.
And being from Texas, it makes a lot of sense that OU would be interested in this kid. I mean, have you seen him play? What do you like about his game?
So the only time I've watched him up close was at the Navy All-American, some of the practices. He was down there. He was one of those guys. And, and I will say, to kind of the point of the previous conversation, down there, the talk was, well, if OU offers that guy, he's going to OU. Like he had told several people, this isn't like, oh, he gets the offer, that's a dream school. Like, I think this has been a dream school for Bo Bentley for a while. Like, and that kind of factors into what I'm talking about as well. Like, Oklahoma makes that offer knowing that guy's going to take that offer very seriously. So you have to think about those things. We talk about that with in-state offers all the time. Like, you're going to make that offer, you've got to know you probably are going to have to stand behind it. So I think that's a very interesting angle to consider. But watching him, I thought he was really impressive. And again, now you're watching him in a practice, so he's not doing a lot of the things, the ad-libbing and some of the stuff that people will have watched in that state championship game where, he is very skilled when the plays break down. Guys, it's not hard to watch him and see some of the stuff of Mateer. Like, same kind of element, like where you like what he does on script, but at the same time, you kind of watch him and you're like, that dude just has a way of making plays. And I'm not telling you he is a guy that's going to go out there and run 4.5 and is the most lethal guy in the world with his feet. But Eddie talked about it. 16 touchdowns, 900 yards. Guy can make plays with his feet. Like, there's no question about it. And I think he is almost more dangerous, especially at this early point in his career. He's almost more dangerous when it does start to break down and chaos does kind of start to happen. Again, I like the kid, and I can tell you, I know there are staffs out there that value him a little more highly than when you look at the rankings and you see, some of the spots where he is ranked. I can tell you there are a lot of staffs in the country that think he's a top 10 quarterback in the country.
Josh, just a quick follow-up on Jaden ONeal. Looking back on it, and I get it, hindsight's 20/20, but when OU had all this staff turnover, Seth Luttrell's fired, they're hiring a new offensive coordinator, do you look back and go, you're a little surprised that maybe Jaden didn't decommit and at least just open back up his recruitment when they did have so many, changes?
I was, guys, and I want to say we talked about that, like kind of
Yeah.
saying it's impressive that Jaden didn't waver. Jaden, I mean, not to say that he didn't waver. Jaden obviously looked at some things and that kind of thing, but he never decommitted. There was never that like, oh, this is going to happen any day now feeling to it. Jaden was pretty steadfast, wanted to see what OU was going to do, wanted to see who the new offensive coordinator was going to be. And guys, he wasn't in the Navy All-American game because of California rules. But at the same time, he went down to the combine, and I know, he talked to our guy Sam Spiegelman. He talked to several different outlets, and locked in was the word he used over and over again. So this is going to be an interesting situation. Kind of what transpires going forward. We're going to have to watch this because I will say the thing that, and again, like I kind of wanted to see what it would look like. And then early Saturday morning, Jaden's tweeting pictures with him and Kaden Jones and Mason James. And I've talked before about the friendship that he and Kaden Jones already had. And then he had talked to our guide on 3, Steve Wiltfong, about, Mason James being one of the guys he was really wanting to get in the class with him in 2026. So everything seemed like it was kind of going to plan. And then as time went on, there was almost nothing further. Like there wasn't like so many of these guys like, oh, thanks for the great weekend, Coach Venables. Love chopping it up with you, blah, blah, blah. You didn't see any of that from Jaden ONeal. And maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Sure.
Something feels off with that. That just doesn't feel like Jaden, who is very socially aware, very forward with the way he communicates with OU fans and really kind of to the media through his social outlets.
Last question before we move on from the quarterback position. Is there a world that you could live in where they would take both? Or is this going to have to be a decision that ultimately maybe a coaching staff makes and says this is going to be our guy? Or is that the bridge that we're at, I guess, is what I'm asking. Is there going to have to be kind of a fork in the road moment where they go, we either want Bo Bentley or we want Jaden ONeal? Is it either or?
If it's Oklahoma, I have no doubt they'd love to have both, guys. I mean,
Sure.
We know the world we're living in with quarterbacks and the way they transfer out, and bring in as many as you can that you think can win football games for you. I don't think there's any question. In a perfect world, that's what Oklahoma would like to do. I think Oklahoma knows, and I think largely based on what we've seen, they understand that they're probably going to have to make a choice here. I don't know that I fully thought through like how that all plays out and what they want to do. But I will say, we know Jaden ONeal's planning to enroll early. I know he's going through, all the stuff at Narbonne. You kind of wonder what his plan is his senior season, because obviously Narbonne's going to be not in the playoffs, all these things. So what is his plan? Like what is he having to do just on the high school level to have a normal senior year? So there's a lot in play. And again, you just kind of wonder like what the move is going forward. And with Bo Bentley coming to Norman this coming weekend, I don't know, guys. Like, I mean, like, would it shock me if something seismic happened before terribly long? No, I don't think it would. I think people need to be prepared for there could be some movement at the quarterback position.
Very interesting. Ben Arbuckle mixing it up already, it would seem, at least reading the tea leaves on what's going to happen at quarterback. Let's start moving through some of the guys. I know that Steve Wiltfong did a big comprehensive notebook just coming out of Saturday, and Junior Day kind of hitting some highlights. Let's start with Kaden Ford, the Duncanville defensive end, one of the top players in the country, and a school that Oklahoma hasn't had a whole lot of success in. We've talked about Oklahoma and their efforts in Duncanville ISD. It seemed like everything went really well this weekend for Kaden Ford in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think they've done a great job. And again, sometimes it's a staff effort. And again, I'm not saying that it's not with KJ Ford. A lot of staff's putting in work on him. Miguel Chavis has done an outstanding job, guys. This is kind of what we look at, dating back to the first full class with PJ Adebawaway, and then, a couple years later, or a year later with Danny Okoye, where it was kind of like Danny and OU were not going to happen, and Chavis just never gave up and kind of kept fighting that fight and got OU back in that race, and obviously is a guy that, we've heard lots of people who've had a chance to watch him in practice say that dude can be special. I think KJ Ford is as high on their board as any defensive end they're looking at. The Jake Cruel kid from IMG, I know those are two guys they really like a lot. I think that would be maybe their dream pairing if they could make that work. But there's no question that they really hit a lot of good notes with them, made him feel like a priority, really kind of rolled out the red carpet. And again, you throw that in, and then obviously Oklahoma's pursuing his teammate, Zach Turner, the tight end as well. Oklahoma could exercise a lot of Duncanville demons in just 1 year.
It'd be a good year to do it. You mentioned him earlier. Kaden Hall, the Milton, Florida product, number 2 safety in the country, 6'3", 175. Certainly somebody that could fit in on the back end for Brandon Hall.
Yeah. And again, guys, we talk about some of the jobs Chavis has done. Brandon Hall landing elite safeties that a lot of people didn't give him a lot of chance at. I feel like that's just kind of becoming the way it is. He does an outstanding job with that room. Last year with a Marion Robinson, and we know Arkansas tried really hard to make a push for the in-state guy down the stretch. I mean, they've done an outstanding job, but this guy, he is just one of those big, long, freaky athletes. He's one of those guys, again, where we've talked about this, where you could see him in several roles. Like, could he grow into a cheetah? I know some schools have already even talked to him about linebacker. He's so big and kind of physical. So there's potential there. He could do some different stuff, but I think it is fair to assume that he'll probably return. I mentioned him talking about coming back for a spring practice, wanting to see maybe the red-white game. So I think OU will see him again. And the first visits can happen. Once guys start to really take those second, third trips, I think that's when you start knowing, like, okay, and it's not just about like, oh, the coach is like, guys, let's be real. The NIL stuff is making sense. Like all the little pieces that have to be in place for a recruitment to escalate, I think that's when we'll know. And if Kaden Hall comes back, I think then you start taking it pretty seriously.
Josh, who are some of the schools that Oklahoma would have to beat out to get him? Because I feel like he's getting pursued by a lot of top programs.
Yeah, that's kind of a who's who. I mean, yeah. Milton is a place where a lot of people recruit. I've heard some talk of Alabama, obviously. Again, like, I think it would be the usual suspects. Like Florida, I know. Like, there are – and I will say the thing that helps Oklahoma, kind of to your question, George, is I don't think there's that school where you're like, I don't know how you beat them. Like, I don't – like, there's – his dad went here, his mom went there. It's not – I haven't heard anything like that to date. Now, I won't say that I am as versed in the Kaden Hall recruitment as I am some other guys, because he's a fairly newer name and I don't know all the background yet. But what I have gathered is this is open. Like, if somebody wanted to come in and pull a surprise, this is the kind of kid you could maybe do it with.
Another player that was getting his first impression of Norman and Oklahoma recently named a top 10. Oklahoma was included in that. Chad Simmons from On3 caught up with him post-visit, but Cleveland Glenville 4-star linebacker Sincere Johnson obviously had some glowing things to say about Oklahoma. Great name at linebacker. What do you make of is it a genuine interest? I know Oklahoma made the top 10, but coming off the visit, where do things stand with Oklahoma and Sincere Johnson at a position that I would imagine is going to be a priority going into 2026?
Yeah, it has to be a priority. And again, you talk about the impression he made, and they did all that without a linebackers coach. Like, I mean, that tells you something, and you wonder, like, kind of what answers was he getting? And I haven't had a chance to catch up with him yet. Have reached out. Hopefully we can get that done. But with Sincere, it's kind of the opposite of what I said with Kaden Hall. Kid from Ohio, a kid from Glenville. I mean, for those that don't know, that's Ted Ginn. That's years of Ohio State guys that just pipeline straight from Glenville to Ohio State. That's a tough win. Like, it just is. At the same time, the things he said, like the things that he talked about standing out to him, that's stuff that's like foundational Oklahoma stuff. And, he talked about a lot of the off-field stuff, the things that we all know with the Soul Mission and a lot. And he didn't even mention the Soul Mission by name, but just some of the principles that we know Brent Venables values and kind of what he puts into his program. That's stuff that he seemed to be attracted to. So could a return visit be possible? I absolutely think so. Do I really want to get OU fans' hopes up that this is a guy they're going to pull away? I wouldn't go that far. Now, obviously, the Jim Knowles situation, all of that, maybe that can obviously help because obviously Jim Knowles would have been the guy he has dealt with a lot at Ohio State. So maybe the door's a little bit open, but there's a long way to go for Oklahoma for me to really think like, okay, he could pick Oklahoma at some point.
Josh, this is a more I don't. It doesn't really. I guess it relates to Sincere, but like who was maybe his primary recruiter this weekend? Was it just Brent Venables? Was James Skalski stepping in? I know J.P. Lossman has been on the road with OU. Do you know who exactly has kind of been that main recruiter for that?
No, now I will say, interestingly, and you mentioned him, the only guy that I remember seeing in his picture that I was like, he hasn't been in all the pictures was Skalski. So I think there had to be some, okay, like James is going to do some of this for Oklahoma. They're going to help out a little bit. And, you know, the few times I've had a chance to talk with players who've kind of been around Skalski, not surprisingly, love the guy. He is a linebacker's linebacker. And so I think a lot of those guys really respond. Yeah. I mean, and I will say, guys, I know I'm sounding negative for OU fans, but if I'm Brent Venables, I can't pour enough energy into Sincere Johnson if I think I've got a chance because I love this guy on tape. He's like 6'3", 220. He flies around. Like he is a, like when you're talking about who could be that next great linebacker at Oklahoma, this guy would step in and be like, that's my guy. Like, that's who I'm betting on right there. Like, he is very instinctual. It's not hard to figure why Brent Venables offered this guy, got him into campus, like why they're putting energy into something that is, like I said, it's going to be a tough hill to climb, but he's good enough that I'm like, you got to kind of shoot your shot a little bit.
You mentioned him at the top, had a pair of Texas A&M commits from the DFW area from Mesquite. Marquel Ford, Ryan Gilbert, either or. It sounded like Oklahoma made an impression on one of these guys.
Yeah. Now what's really funny here is I've talked a little bit to Ryan Gilbert, and Ryan liked the visit a lot. Like talked about, being around Coach Valai and them kind of telling him, this is why Oklahoma sees you, we'd be the best fit for you because of X, Y, Z. And, I've actually got to run some of that story. I'm still catching up on all the guys I've heard back from. But it's Marquel Ford that I talked to a few players that were like, I think Oklahoma's got a pretty good chance there. Like and I will say in the words they said to me were more direct than that. Like they felt pretty confident about OU's chances. So we'll see what that means. But I think Oklahoma has never given up on Marquel Ford, even after he committed to A&M. He's a guy they liked really early on. Obviously, Mesquite Horn's a place that Oklahoma's got a lot of familiarity. They've got some friendly staff there at Horn that really always goes out of their way to help Oklahoma. Guys that last year brought Lamont Rogers up to his official visit. So there's always I don't want to say ease because it's always hard. But some places make it more difficult and some places make it less difficult. And Horn is a place where I think Oklahoma feels very comfortable recruiting.
And he's been committed since June. Is that right?
Marquel Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Texas A&M.
Right.
I would say I know it was summer. I don't know exactly when. But, yeah, it's been a while now.
Okay.
Very good. Marquel Ford, obviously the quarterback safety out of Mesquite Horn. Ryan Gilbert out of Mesquite North Forney. Anybody else, just in terms of guys from a national presence, because I do want to get into Kaden Jones and some of the guys that were there from OK Preps. Noah Best was back. Aldra Miles was back out of Kaufman, Texas. You've gone and seen him, Josh. Kamarian Johnson out of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, it sounds like had a pretty good visit. Any national perspective before we get into some of the guys here locally?
The guy, and Eddie, I'll do you one better. We'll go international here with the Walden Sone kid, the Swedish kid from Malmo.
Yeah, PPI, right? PPI, is that
he's a PPI guy, right. With Brandon Collier and those guys. I got he was a guy, he was around, I was told during bowl practices, he came for a game this year. So this is his third time to really be around Oklahoma in the matter of like 3 or 4 months. And so I think Oklahoma's making an impression here. And I know Todd Bates went and saw him during the middle of the week last week. So they've had a very real presence here. I know they've worked with PPI for a while, really, haven't had the success that maybe some other schools have. But again, I got the impression that that Oklahoma did a really nice job, and I can tell you, talking to a few of the guys, he was one of the ones that was singled out as like, that is a massive human being. Like, I had someone tell me, like, that's just a big dude. So again, European players, I think it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. But as more and more of those guys come in, you're going to find more success. And this is the body type you're looking for. Like a big athletic guy, can move his feet. He's very raw. He's going to need time. But guys, I mean, if there's a guy on this staff that I would feel really comfortable handing a big athletic, piece to his position room, Todd Bates is going to figure out a way to make that guy a player. Like, I would be very surprised if that weren't the case. So again, I think it's a really interesting storyline to watch.
Sone listed at 6'5", 290.
Damn,
per on
that's a
three.
big dude.
So yeah,
Big
that
boy.
would certainly match up. Anything offensive line wise? I know Primus was in town from Midland. You had Noah Best coming back from Midlothian. Any news coming out of there with Bill Beatenbow and everything going on with the offensive line?
I talked to Noah Best, and I talked to both guys a little bit, but did talk to Noah Best, and he kind of mentioned that one of the guys he really hit it off with, and I said earlier, I heard a lot of talk of like, it was cool hanging out with the freshmen. They really enjoyed that because some of those guys, they've been on these visits together the last few years. Like,
Sure.
They know each other. And so being able to go and kind of like, what's it been like? What are the last, what's the first, 2-3 weeks been like in Norman, that kind of deal. And having somebody that can, is inside but still feels like a guy they can trust, I think is really valuable. And he mentioned Ryan Foje. He and Ryan Foje really having some good talks and kind of it sounds like that's a guy that Noah will kind of sound some stuff off of going forward. They have some similar interests as far as major. And I think people will be interested to know. Noah Best is considering aviation as a major.
Wow.
Dude, nobody's messing with that pilot. Like that's a big boy. Like, I mean, I'm like, okay, that's a first for me from an offensive lineman. But
Might have trouble fitting into the cockpit to fly a plane.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to fly fighters. I don't think that's going to be the plan. But he's one of these guys, and when I went and saw him this season, he was like, yeah, people really kind of, because I was born in Oklahoma, there's this idea that I'm just going to Oklahoma, and he goes, I don't think that's right, kind of thing. But yet, whenever I ask him, Eddie, and I've talked to you about this for years as being kind of a tell, where are you going? I don't know for sure. Do you have anything set? I know I'm going to Oklahoma. Oh, okay. Like, you can just kind of, I'm going to file that away. Again, I'm not saying Noah's about to decide or anything like that, but the one school that seems to remain constantly kind of in the forefront of his mind is Oklahoma. I think that is something you can read into. We'll have to see how things go over, of course, the next 6-9 months, but I think it's a really good starting point that Oklahoma is at with Noah Best.
Josh, I want to catch up with some of the OK Preps kids. DJ Akerson finally picked up the offer that we had talked about going into last week out of Putnam City High School in Oklahoma City. But first, let us tell you about William & Lauren, the official custom clothier of OU football. William & Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Their perfectly tailored clothing ensures every Sooner stands out in comfort and style at prices that make luxury accessible. Visit William & Lauren in Oklahoma City or online at williamandlauren.com. That is williamandlauren.com. Dress like a champion to make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football. We'll be getting over there to get suited up for the big Stoya nuptials.
I can't wait.
Do you know your jacket size? You're going to need
Nope,
that.
I do not know.
You're going to have to get fitted, all that kind of stuff.
I know. I'm excited, though, to get a custom suit for my wedding.
Good.
It's going to be sweet.
Be looking forward to that, maybe even as early as this week with the fine people at William & Lauren. Check them out in Oklahoma City. I believe a brick and mortar is coming to the 918 in Tulsa, or you can just go online, williamandlauren.com. Special thank you to them. They've been with us all season. Josh, let's start with DJ Akerson. I know that Brent Venables was by Putnam City High School this morning over in War Acres, but we talked about him last week. Obviously, a lot to like when you look at the measurables with the Putnam City talent. He finally picks up the offer while in Norman over the weekend. He muted himself. This might be a first.
no!
You muted
I
yourself.
did it. Damn it!
That was bound to happen. We hadn't had any technology problems so far today. So that was just the one faux pas, and we'll get back into it. DJ Akerson, as you were saying.
Yeah, DJ Akerson is a guy that, again, like 2 weeks ago, no one knew about this guy. Like, no one was talking about him, and he has just gone, from that to Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Boston College, and he's got, I think, Nevada maybe was the other offer. So he's picking up nothing but steam. He'll get more and more offers as schools start going through over these next few weeks here. But DJ's funny because, he's clearly so excited about Oklahoma. He's very interested, but he plays it real low key. He's real like, oh yeah, like I liked it. I'm not in any rush, and he's not. But what was funny is talking, he was very open that like his uncles, his dad, they're big OU fans. His dad, of course, was with him on this trip. And I kind of asked him, well, what dad thinking? He's like, dad sold. like doesn't need anything else. And so I think that is that's obviously a really good sign for Oklahoma, which would be, Eddie, I know you and I share no particular love for the Pirates, but this would be only the second guy that Oklahoma would have landed from Putnam City since 2000.
Yeah.
Like that's just, and it may go well back before that, but that's just the data I can check. And that,
I guess
crazy because PC's had some good players.
Technically, it'd be second, right? Are we saying all Putnam City school districts? Because Ron Tatum, obviously.
I'm talking about just Putnam City High.
Oh, Putnam City
which
High.
Which he would be joining the famous Ron Tatum.
Yeah, so, no doubt. They have not, Oklahoma just has not had a whole lot of success recruiting the Putnam City. Any three of the schools. I'm trying to think back to anybody that even would have been on the radar. I guess the kid that ended up at that was my age, went to Putnam City High School, went it to SMU, I believe, played in the NFL for a couple years. Now I'm completely forgetting his name. Track star, Brian.
Brian McCann.
Brian McCann. Yeah, he was a dude.
Those
were some pretty good Putnam City teams.
Colin Clay, obviously, that went to Arkansas and then ended up at Oklahoma State and had a nice, pretty solid little career. Yeah. So, they've had some guys, but, Putnam City, the district, it's been a little dry for a little while here.
Yeah. I think we're a basketball school. The Thunder went by to see the Putnam City girls team last weekend. Just in terms of DJ Akerson and hearing a story about his dad being able to go down to the campus and stuff as along with him, there is like a certain level of innocence I think that has been lost in just the recruiting world over the last couple of years, maybe over the last decade. That it's still good to hear those stories of guys getting to go to I guess places like maybe even a Bo Bentley that grew up an Oklahoma fan, still getting that opportunity. Somebody that is extremely familiar with Oklahoma and the way that they run things down there is obviously Jinx Oklahoma's own. Kaden Jones back in town. Just in terms of, I know he was a guy that we maybe mentioned, like at some point it feels like he's going to start whittling this thing down. He did announce the top 5 last week: Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kansas, Louisville, Vanderbilt. Just in terms of where Oklahoma's at with the running back commit or running back target in Kaden Jones. Where do things stand here coming out of Junior Day weekend?
When I saw the top 5, it was kind of like, okay, I kind of like where that is for Oklahoma. Not that there's some good programs there, but I would say with the exception of Tennessee, those really aren't schools you see Oklahoma lose many recruiting battles to. So Tennessee's kind of the one you want to watch there, but I still really like where Oklahoma is. Spoke to Kaden a little bit following the visit. We haven't had a chance to really sit down and catch up, but I got the impression that things went as well as they could have. He's a guy that really likes DeMarco Murray. I know Ben Arbuckle was up by Jinx late last week, and I think Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And really, they just they're hitting the right notes with him. There's no pressure. It's super low key. Anybody that's been around Caden's a super laid back. He has a kind of Cali vibe to him, just a very, very easygoing dude. So I think anything that was high pressure and, hey, your dad went here, you got to come, I don't think that would resonate right with him. So I think they've played it really well. And I think they're right where they would want to be in his recruitment.
I feel like we've been covering his recruitment for a long time now. Do you know when he wants to make a decision, Josh? Is he wanting to get this over with?
Hashtag tell it.
Shout out to Keywan.
One of the great follows.
it is never boring on the Q. You talk about spicy. Q1 he keeps it spicy. But no, I would guess Caden's looking at the summer, like a lot of these kids, like early June, mid June. Take some of his officials through kind of late May and early June, and then be done. Would it shock me if he pulled the trigger early? No, it wouldn't, because I think Kaden really has a special feeling about Oklahoma. At the same time, I think he wants to. I think he's very sincere in giving other schools a look. Like, he doesn't want it to be, I just went there because my dad went there. Like, he doesn't want that feeling, and so I think he's tried to be patient with it. But if Oklahoma, I think, continues with what they're doing, continues kind of on the right track, I think they're going to be really tough to beat.
No doubt. Very good. Real quick before we get out of here, there was a tight end offer last week. Luke Sorenson out of Servite High School in California, one of the it used to be a pretty prominent school. I'm not terribly familiar with what they've been doing recently, but it was good to see a tight end offer go out.
First one since the summer of 24. That it's been a minute.
Should have been a party. We should have had an emergency podcast.
We talked about it. It was discussed, but no. And I talked to Luke quite a bit. And Eddie, in case he sees this, Servite's still awfully darn good. Now,
okay.
They play in that same league with Bosco and Modern Day. And,
sure.
Now I will say 2-3 years ago, it was Tetaroa McMillan and the quarterback at Arizona, whose name I'm just going to go blank on.
Fafita?
Yeah. It was when they were at Servite together. That was about the closest run anybody's made to beating them in that CIF Southern section. I want to say they lost like 32-29. Maybe that's in my head from last night. But it was something along those lines. They lost really, really close. And, anybody that follows it knows it's usually just Bosco and Modern Day. But I want to say Servite beat Bosco in the semis and then just came up a little short against Modern Day in the finals. So they're going. But Sorenson, he's already talking about coming out for a spring practice. I think Oklahoma's really, really impressed him. And he kind of mentioned that, like, there was some people he'd read that didn't love that Oklahoma had offered a Cali guy. And I looked online. I couldn't find any of that. But whatever gets you going, okay, fine. But he seemed very, very set on checking out Oklahoma.
And Josh, things are still good with Ryder Mix from Lone Star?
I was going to add, he was also in town, one of the three current commits in the 2026 class, Ryder Mix out of Lone Star Frisco. You'd already caught up with him. If you want to read on SoonerScoop.com, you could read the story in full.
Yeah, and we talked about that specifically. I asked him, had they laid it out that there was going to be another tight end? He was, they know the number. They were very honest with me. The numbers aren't where they want them to be. They're looking to add another guy. So, between, Sorenson, Zach Turner, Ryder Mix, like, Oklahoma's got a chance to put together a pretty strong tight end class, because I like the Sorenson kid a lot. Where I think of Ryder as kind of like an H-back tight end kind of guy, and Zach Turner's more of that flex, kind of like a James Hanna type of guy, for those that will remember that name. I think Sorenson's kind of right down the middle. He's a true, you can line him up and he could be an edge blocker, and he is a nasty one. And then at the same time, you can hit him over the middle. He can make some plays after the catch. I liked him a lot. I thought that offer made all the sense in the world.
Very good. That is a recap of everybody and anybody. Was there anybody that we didn't cover that you wanted to get out there, Josh? I'm trying to look over my notes real quick.
Let me ask a better question.
Go ahead,
Josh.
I don't know if it's going to be a better question, but it's going to be an added question. How about that?
Is there anybody that maybe entered the weekend that you didn't either know about or you thought, you had no chance with, that came out of this week and you're like, all right, OU's got a legitimate chance and maybe a commitment comes soon? I don't know. It sounds like Marquel Ford could be in that category. I mean, who would you maybe say is in that category?
I would say two, kind of from opposite end of the spectrum. I think first would be Daniel Odom, the wide receiver from California, a St. John Bosco guy, kind of on topic. I thought from what I've heard, that visit went really well. I know Emmett Jones has really made him one of the priorities in this 2026 wide receiver group. So I think Oklahoma's got a chance there. I think he'll be back. I would bet they get an official visit. I like the direction that's trending. I'm not saying OU's got him or anything like that, but I think they're in better shape than I thought they were. The other, I would say, again, from a very different end, Norman North's Daniel McMorris. This is a guy that's starting to pick up some steam. He's got Iowa State. He's Texas. I'm not Iowa State. I'm sorry. He's got a Texas Tech offer, and Tech is very good at kind of the height, weight, speed. They very much value kind of the physical traits. This guy's listed at 6'6.5", 265, and guys, when I watch him on tape, he can move his feet. He is a finisher, one of the nastier finishers I've seen on tape this year at offensive tackle. This wouldn't shock me if this is a guy that comes into his senior year and is 280 or something and really skyrockets. Like I see a lot of stuff there that I'm really interested in, and I know OU told him they're going to come by the school this week, kind of, probably talk to his coaches there and get a little bit more information. I don't know that Oklahoma's going to go offer him right now, but if they start to trend in the wrong direction with a few guys, I really like the possibility of McMorris.
Very interesting. I believe Trey Warmington over there working with the offensive lineman at Norman North High School. So teammate Mason James, sounded like everything went well there too. All sights still set on him being maybe possibly part of this 2026 class. I know he's been impressive every time we saw him, and the last time that we saw him was really impressive in the I think it was at the very end of this past year for the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I still like where OU is with Mason. I don't see any reason why that's going to be a problem. I think Emmett Jones has given a lot of attention there, really made him one of the priorities. And again, you look at his junior tape, it's not hard to see why. He is a special player.
Yeah, absolutely. He was phenomenal when we saw him this past year against Owasso, the state runner-up. Couldn't remember. They got beat by Bixby, though. All right, very good. Josh, we appreciate it. There's going to be continued coverage coming out of this Junior Day weekend, obviously, with some of the stuff we left up at the top with the quarterback situation. What's going to happen? Which way does Ben Arbuckle go? Is he going to have to make a decision? All of that will be unfolding here over the next couple of days, weeks, years, whatever. You get the idea. For George, Josh, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.